Have you ever been in an argument with your significant other and they say, just forget about it? That is an example of a thought-terminating cliche. You want to hear more about this topic because it can greatly affect how you interpret social cues both in your formal and informal environments. After researching this topic, I found when a thought-terminating cliche is used to determine one's opinion, it lacks logic. I will bring up how most times these phrases don't make any sense, the reasoning why it is used in a conversation, and how to continue the conversation when these phrases are used. I will now start off with my first point of there is no logic behind the phrases or no background research was even done to determine their opinion. An example would be if you and a friend are discussing if the world is overpopulated. You ask them for their opinion and they respond with, everybody knows it. In the article, The Life's Extensionist Guide to Logical Fallacies by Nicola Bogala, he counteracts this thought by stating, a possible motive is not proof that this actually happens. Coming in with that mindset before the conversation and only relying on this thought-terminating cliche shows our logic is not based on any facts. Another popular phrase that is used is, because God said so, or from the other side, because science says so. Conclusions made before the conversations have evolved causes people to rely on these types of phrases. Next, a thought-terminating cliche is used when the person wants to shut down the conversation because they cannot handle the counter-argument. An example of this would be, you win some, you lose some. If you've ever been in a situation when this phrase is used, it can be confusing and difficult to continue with the conversation. As David DeZosa stated in his article, these can be used to suggest that the conversation is done. This phrase in particular is often used by people who in fact fail at something. For example, maybe an exam and they don't want to continue with the conversation. In that conversation, they're most likely trying to shut down the conversation because they're uncomfortable about discussing how they lost. Moving along, one of the most controversial topics in our country right now revolves around politics. You may find yourself in a situation when someone uses the phrase, we will have to agree to disagree. This phrase implies the person does not want to discuss the topic further with you. However, this doesn't only happen with friends and family. As stated in Wikipedia's now deleted page on thought-terminating cliche, the thought-terminating cliches are sometimes used during political discourse to enhance appeal or to shut down debate. Moving on to my final point, I told you 2 reasons why people use thought-terminating cliches, and now I will explain to you how to combat these phrases. First, you understand that most of the time, there is no solid research done to back up these phrases. In a case where someone states, because science said so, ask them in return, what research have you done to prove your statement? While this may not seem like a natural response for you, it will be clear if they are using a thought-terminating cliche or if they actually did background research to determine their opinion. Second, when you're in a situation where someone is using the thought-terminating cliche, you win some, you lose some, this can be an indicator that they want to end the conversation to avoid further discussion of logical evidence. If you recognize this cliche and feel comfortable with addressing this thought stopper, you can follow up with interest by asking for reasons how they came up with that conclusion. Referring back to my exam example, imagine if your friend failed an exam and you ask them about the results. In response, they say, I failed the exam, but you win some, you lose some. You can follow up by asking, don't you feel that you had control over if you failed or passed? Although this may seem abrupt and rude, it can actually lead to better outcomes. Since the topic is being discussed further, maybe you can ask the person if they would like to study with you for the next exam. Thought-terminating cliches don't always have to stop the conversation. They can open up doors to positive outcomes. To conclude, after going over the lack of rationale behind thought-terminating cliches, why they are used, and how to respond to them, it becomes clear that using these phrases to express one's opinion lacks logic. Now, when your significant other tries shutting down the conversation by saying, just forget about it, you can open the conversation up rather than allowing their thought-turning cliche to have control of shutting down the conversation. Good luck.